Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic. Let's do it. What is your real horror story experience? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Was out working on the track late one night in Georgia. Had to take a leak, so I went to the tree line. Heard this awful growl and some twigs break. Then I unmistakably heard the crashes and pops of something running through the woods at me. The guys said when they looked, I was running through an arch of my own piss, dick flapping, trying to run up the ballast. I heard it when it made it to the ballast just a couple of feet behind me. I ducked down to crawl up the ballast hill on all fours when it ran past me, an effing pig the size of a Volkswagen. Being the passenger in a car that went over a cliff, my leg was impaled by a 9-inch piece of jagged door that got punctured by a rock. The driver was unconscious and had to pull my leg off the metal and climb a 45-foot cliff while bleeding out. My heart stopped in the ambulance. I couldn't ride in cars for a long time. I still have PTSD, nightmares, anxiety, insomnia, and depression because of it. I can't drive anymore either. The anxiety's still too bad. One was I was at a haunted asylum taking pictures, and there was some cool graffiti I wanted to catch, so I took a photo of Anubis. But when the flash went off, I saw a black hooded figure with a scythe instead of for an instant. I tried recreating the moment for my friends who weren't near me at the time, but it didn't work. So, was it a cool piece of graffiti that changed, or something else? I don't know. Also, being in Manhattan on 9/11, we were essentially trapped as they closed all bridges and tunnels. I was in Midtown, and I just have never seen a city so empty, literally like a ghost town. I sat in a small room, hearing military and police helicopters for hours, thinking they were rescuing people, until my friend informed me, via AIM, that the towers had collapsed. We had no TV and not great internet, and I just couldn't fathom it. And then there were the people walking uptown, covered head to toe in dust. The worst may have been when we got home. There was dust there too, and burnt pieces of office paper on the lawn. The air smelled of death. Not really a horror experience, but it scared me a lot. I know it sounds like a creepypasta, but it actually happened. Actually, it happened not too long ago. This is what happened. I was in my kitchen with my brothers. My older brother was getting a snack. I followed him because he was watching a video on his phone. He opened the fridge when my dad came down and said, "Go to sleep." But as he said it, he turned on the lights, and I saw the light reflect off animal-like eyes and somewhat shiny skin through the window. When it realized I could see it, it reeled back swiftly from the view of the window. I froze. As my brothers and dad walked back upstairs, I did too, and told Dad. He said it was probably nothing. Back in junior high, I dated a girl for a brief 2 months. Didn't work out due to personal beliefs and such. Well, after we broke up, she became a stalker. However, I always dismissed it when my friends commented on it, since I was always thinking, what could this 4'5" girl do to me really? Well, one day after school, I had an appointment nearby, which was no more than a 15-minute walk from school. I walked there, rode the elevator up, went through the halls, and finished my dentist appointment within the hour. To my dismay, once I opened the door to leave the office, after receiving a lollipop, I eagerly waited for after each appointment, I found my ex sitting in front of the door. We looked at each other for about a minute until she just gave a subtle smile and began to get up. I never slammed the door as fast as I did that day. My mind was racing, trying to figure out how she managed to find me. I couldn't understand, since the whole time walking, no one was behind me. I rode the elevator alone, and once I exited, there were multiple doors along with numerous hallways that were on that floor. Office woman says my panic and I explained the whole deal. She locked the door and contacted my family. Eventually, her mother was contacted since my mother knew her as well. Long story short, turns out she skipped school, hung around a coffee shop I walked by daily, pretty much, and followed me from afar unknown to me. She never told me how she managed to find the correct office or see what floor I got off at. Still sends chills down my spine thinking about it to this day. I got my first job this summer after I graduated high school at a rundown amusement park. I worked as an announcer in an old game and got to know a lot of employees as it was one of the few shaded places to sit down in. Within a few weeks, I noticed the janitor. He was an older gentleman, maybe in his 40s or 50s, and he would always sweep the doorstep of the games as it was my duty to keep the area clean. I would politely wave as he walked by, and that was that. Eventually, he started coming by more often, offering to take out the trash and help clean. I accepted the help as I was often busy. But after a while, my male coworkers and I noticed that he would pace the windows outside of my shop. He would walk back and forth, waiting for me to acknowledge him, watching with his broom in his hand and cleaning spots that he had done an hour earlier. Once I counted him walking back and forth 8 times across my windows. Then he started learning my schedule. Somehow, he was always taking his smoke break when I was coming in from my shift. He would be waiting on the corner, smoking, until he saw me and would walk up to my car so that he could walk me to work. That's when I realized a seemingly normal coworker was someone that was beginning to stalk me. I started having panic attacks and nightmares about this janitor that kept on meeting me. My male coworkers would note the way he watched me, and they began walking with me to and from my car at night. I saw him once at a gas station as I was pulling in, and he tried to come up to my car, so I left immediately. Then one day I spotted him from a distance, beginning to come into my game that I worked at. I told my coworker I was going to hide, and I hid beneath one of the old machines in a back corner. I could hear my coworkers telling him that I left, and I could hear his footsteps as he walked around. Holding my breath, I saw his shoes stop in front of the machine I was hiding beneath, and he crouched down to my level with a smile. "You're hiding from me now?" he asked. Shortly after that incident, I decided to report him to my manager because I was 18 and unsure if what was happening was me projecting my own fears. She listened to me, my coworkers confirming what happened, and she launched a small investigation. It turns out there were a few of us girls that the janitor decided he liked and began to follow. The youngest was 14. I was 18. I was the first one to come forward, and upon hearing different stories, the janitor was fired from the park. To this day, I always have a sense of unease in the workplace and a fear that a friendly coworker could be something far worse. And I will never forget the smile as he looked at me from under the machine, proud that he had found me when I was my most afraid. One time he makes his business known and heads off toward the bathroom. He returns a second later and says, "There's already someone in the bathroom." Now, I do know for a fact that it's just 2 of us home, so the hair stands up on my neck. I ask him, "What do you mean?" He repeats, "There's already someone in the bathroom." Now I'm thinking, is it someone I see dead people or someone in a hockey goalie mask? So I grab the biggest knife from my knife block and tell him to stay here. I walk to the bathroom, take a wide angle to see in, nobody. Slowly and quietly walk toward the shower, pull back the curtain, nothing. By now my son has walked around the corner and I ask him, "Where did you see the person?" He points to an unflushed toilet and says, "See, someone's already here." His big brother didn't flush the toilet. I woke up to pee. I couldn't see very well. It was as if there was a veil over my eyes, but I caught movement on the window and there was a shadow on it, as if someone was looking into my room. I grabbed my axe and went looking, but I couldn't see a thing outside, just fog. Suddenly, I was on my bed again, waking up because I heard a bang on the door. I stared at it in the dark. I could see everything clearer. Something banged on the door again, harder. It flew open, and there was an outline of a big man in a trench coat and a hat. My heart was pumping so fast, I could freaking hear it. I woke up again. I couldn't move at all. The shadow of a kid, maybe 1 or 2 years old, was jumping around me. I was very scared, but thought, what would Dean Winchester do? When the shadow kid came up to my face, I threw a punch at it. It disappeared. I hadn't actually punched anything, but I was able to move my fingers again, then my entire arm, and found myself with my eyes wide open and actually woken up for real. I finally went to the bathroom. Sleep paralysis is a bitch. My husband and I were on a road trip about 12 or 13 years ago, and we were passing through New Mexico. So the remake of Hitcher with Sean Bean had just come out not too long before that, and there's a scene where the main character passes a sign for Tatum, New Mexico, and then Sean Bean comes up behind them in a Firebird with Closer by Nine Inch Nails playing. So imagine my surprise as my husband, then fiance, and I see a road sign saying something about Tatum, and about 20 or so minutes after that, I see a black car coming up fast behind us on an otherwise empty road. Imagine my double surprise when the random shuffle we had the CD player on comes up with Closer. I'm already like, what the, so goofy. Now imagine my triple mega ultra fudge covered super suppressive when the car behind us gets close enough for me to see it's a Firebird. I start giggling like a lunatic, and my husband's looking at me like I'm nuts, but I manage to tell him what's up through my maniacal, I'm so delighted and so scared right now giggle fit. The dude passes us, and it's just a normal middle-aged dude out for a joyride in his really cool car, but I'll never forget him, and I'll always wonder if this was how he passed his time on occasion, just waiting near Tatum, New Mexico sign so he can prank unwitting young couples on the road. It's a horror story that didn't actually end in horror, but I still think it's a good tale. Yeah, I'd like to think that guy might be a quasi-local to the area and saw the movie and just thought like, hey, you know what'd be a good idea? This. And then did that. So I'm glad it was laughable, even if you were a little petrified. In high school, my buddies and I would somewhat frequently visit the local cemetery. The town was very small, and it was one of the nicer places to hang out. We went around 2 a.m. one morning, and my friend Justin decided he was going to pound on the door of a mausoleum, spelling, and start saying, "No one loved you, no one loves you," over and over again. Suddenly we heard a coyote howl in the distance, in the woods a few miles out. No one thought anything of it. We've all heard this before. Then we heard several more a little bit closer to us this time, so we started recording the audio. Then it all was completely deafening howls that absolutely were coming from the cemetery. We all heard animal sounds and howling and coyote noises and bolted the hell out of there. As soon as we got to the exit and out of the yard, the noise completely stopped. Had to listen back to our recording to make sure it happened, and it totally did. No explanation for that night. Gave me nightmares for a long time. Woke up one night at my grandparents' house when I was like 7. Hear the theme song from Halloween playing, and for some reason I decided to investigate what was happening. I walked around for a little while and checked the whole upstairs and found nothing. Eventually I walked over to the stairs and looked over the railing toward the living room. I swear for a split second I saw the keys to their piano playing by themselves, and then suddenly the music stopped. Somehow I managed to just go back to sleep after that. My sister also says she had memories of that song playing during the night too. When I was 8, my mother bought me a knockoff American Girl doll that looked like me. Played with the doll all day, yada yada yada. Started cleaning up the doll stuff and laid the doll in a little crib with her pajamas on and all the other doll accessories arranged perfectly. Next morning I wake up to find the doll completely naked with her head hanging from the pajama sleeve tied to the crib, and all her toys and items arranged in a circle around the crib. My sister and brother were babies at the time, and my parents wouldn't have done this as a joke. Since then I've given the doll to Goodwill, but haven't seen any weird spiritual stuff happen in my house since then. When I was a kid, about 7 or 8, I was dog paddling on a kickboard during swim lessons. I let go of the kickboard and instantly, thanks dense bones, sank. I could see the surface getting farther and farther from hear muffled screams and shouts. I started to black out, and then someone grabbed me and swam me back up to the surface. It wasn't scary. It was more like there were a lot of things happening I needed to pay attention to. I wasn't scared at all until after it was over. Almost 40 years later, and I still get the heebie-jeebies remembering what it really feels like when you think you're going to die. When I was 12, my best friend and her older brother and his best friend decided to take us out on the lake and bring out the boat. We got into the middle of the lake and noticed we didn't put the plug in the boat, so we all got out so he could get the water out. I didn't know how to swim, and I never had been on a boat before. I held on to the side of the boat, and suddenly it turned on. I smacked my head on the bottom of the boat and woke up with the propeller tangled around my shorts and the blades stuck on my ass cheeks. I was wearing a life jacket, but the boat was sinking at the same time. I honestly thought I was going to die. Luckily, a guy riding his boat close by heard me screaming, and he came over and cut my shorts off the prop. He took me in his boat back to the shore, where they called an ambulance. It was about a 1-hour ride to the hospital. Sat for a day waiting for surgery. The first one, they cleaned everything out and packed the wound. When it was open, it was about 30 inches long by 10 inches or more wide, and had 2 of those cuts. The second surgery, they gave me 455 stitches and 55 staples. I remember being able to touch my bone. Now I have nightmares, and the first had really bad PTSD, never going on a boat again. I used to work in a movie theater in a small town. We only had 4 screens, and to get to 2 of them, near where the bathrooms were, you had to go down a long hallway to a small lobby-like area that had doors to all the other theaters. One night we were closing, and we had no one show up for our 9 p.m. showings, so I asked my manager if we could change the music playing to My Chemical Romance CD I just got, and he said sure. This CD, since it was an early release, had a hidden last track called Blood that starts with about 1 minute and 30 seconds of dead silence. So I'm going downstairs cleaning up alone, while my manager and other workers were upstairs doing other things. I'm jamming out to the CD, and I'm just about done cleaning when I noticed the music had stopped. It must be done. I'll have to remember to grab it before I walk out, I think to myself. So I start walking down the long hallway when suddenly I start to hear the music again. The song starts with a few simple piano notes saying, "Oh, I guess it isn't done. Weird," I think to myself. So I do my last checks at the bathroom, and am in one of the theaters finishing up when suddenly all of the lights go off and it's pitch black. Over the speakers I hear, "Blood, blood, gallons of the stuff. I gave them all that they can drink and it will never be enough." I screamed and ran back to the front lobby as fast as I could. My manager came downstairs in a panic, and someone from the neighboring cafe came over to check on it because I screamed so loud and so terrified. My manager is the one who had turned off the lights, and the timing was just all around perfect. Legit thought I was about to be murdered. Not so much horror experience, but it was creepy. My mate and I wanted to go to a football game in the evening. His parents were driving, so I said, "I'll come to you." So I walked to his home, 1 street away. I had a really bad vibe on the way to his home, but I arrived safely. On the way to the game, we had to stop at some traffic lights. When I looked to my right, I saw a house. I looked up, and I could see someone with a scream mask on and was holding a big knife. That freaked me out, but nothing happened. Still weird, though. My grandpa has a cabin in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. It gets really, really dark at night. Across the backyard is a small bunkhouse since there's limited space in the cabin. The back of the bunkhouse is essentially the border to the forest. My stepbrother and I, were about 14, were sleeping in the bunkhouse since all the adults were in the cabin and we wanted to hang out and be loud, etc. It was a normal night until we heard something. A few summers before, I had been in the bunkhouse and my uncle tried to scare us all in there by dragging a chair against the outer wall. He succeeded, but he revealed to himself immediately, and we had all laughed about it. My uncle wasn't there with us this time. This time, we heard a scratching sound. It wasn't heavy or loud, but it was persistent. My brother and I figured it was probably a small animal, but being teenagers, we were also fearing the worst, a bear or even a person. The scratching would go on for a few minutes and then stop. Every time we thought it was done, it would start again. We debated just ignoring it since the door to the bunkhouse was locked. We debated confronting what or whoever it was, as we had a baseball bat in there. We eventually decided to run across the yard to the main cabin and sleep in there for the night. So we grabbed the baseball bat and another blunt object and slowly peek outside during a lull in the scratching. As I said, behind the bunkhouse is the forest, and the cabin was about 50 feet away. We ran as fast as we could to the cabin. The cabin door was locked and everyone was asleep. At that moment, we realized we had run back to the bunkhouse and the dark forest behind it, with whatever was scratching the walls waiting just out of sight. We booked it back to the bunkhouse and slammed the door closed behind us. There was no more scratching for the rest of the night, but we were thoroughly shaken up. Eventually, we fell asleep. The most likely scenario is it was a raccoon or other small woodland creature, but I can't help but wonder if it was something bigger, since bears have been spotted on the property several times.